Hi, welcome to fourth grade history. I'm sorry, this is for lessons 142 and 143. You do have a quiz 29. So if you're ready for that and your parents have that out, you can pause the video and take that now. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get into our lesson. I'm gonna ask a couple questions. So if you need the extra review before taking the quiz, you can stay on the video and watch the rest of the video and then take the quiz afterwards. Okay, who was the ruler of Germany in 1914? That was Kaiser Wilhelm II. What is the promise between two or more countries to fight together against their enemies in time of war called? That's an alliance, okay? What was the name given to the countries that sided against Germany? The Allies. And what was the name given to those countries that sided with Germany? The Central Powers. Who was the Archduke that was killed igniting World War I? Francis Ferdinand, Archduke Francis Ferdinand. All right. So yesterday when we talked about the starting of World War I and how there were the countries in Europe were really looking for an excuse to start a war. Some of the countries wanted to fight, and so they just needed an excuse, and the killing of Archduke Ferdinand and his wife was their excuse that they took. Woodrow Wilson was our president at the time, and he kept us, America, neutral for the first 3 years of the war. We're going to look at what brings the U.S. into the war, okay? So German U-boats are what Germany started with their increase in, they started to fortify their weapons and their boats and everything. They figured out a way to make an underwater boat or submarine that would move underneath the water and wouldn't be seen, okay? Which is what our navies have today, only more high tech and more advanced. But these U-boats could fire torpedoes at ships that were carrying food and supplies to England. And see, America was still trading with England, and we were taking them things that the Germans thought that they wanted to stop people from bringing supplies to England in an effect to stop they kind of like a blockade so that they would run out of things, and so that was their goal. And in May of 1915, there was a ship called the Lusitania. It was a passenger ship, and it had many people on it. There were American people, and there were British people from England, and the German U-boats fired on the side of the Lusitania, but without any warning. And they had not fired at the Germans. The Germans fired without cause, and the ship sank quickly, and over 1,000 men, women, and children lost their lives. This really angered the American people because that was American citizens on there and English. And really, I mean, yes, we had fought in wars against England, but we've come to a truce, and England or Great Britain, we do have an alliance with them, a friendship, if you will. And so those people are not just those that we fought in the Revolutionary War, but now they are a country that they're that we would care for, and we wouldn't want that people to be hurt from their country. That was something that really did hit America hard. But with these submarine warfare, the U-boats that were there, Germany sent a letter asking for Mexico's help in the war, and so supposedly this was discovered by British agents, but I don't know if it's ever been fully confirmed. It could have just been something that was heard and repeated many times, but this is the story that we have. The Zimmerman note was sent asking for help from Mexico and promising Mexico. Germany promised Mexico United States land. Okay, part of the U.S., basically the parts that we had fought over: Texas, New Mexico, probably part of California, maybe part of Arizona, places that were fully U.S. soil. Like they were part of us. They had been a part of us for a long time. We had fought, and we had won that battle, that war, and that was not Germany's to give up. But at the same time, Germany was expecting to overpower the U.S. and invade us. I mean, that was one of their plans. They were wanting to rule the world, was their goal, but of course they were not successful in this. But that enraged Americans, because that was our land. Especially the people that lived there were probably thinking, we don't want to live in Mexico now. Suddenly now we're going to live in Mexico because that our portion of land is now Mexican owned. And so that would completely change America. It would change the look. It would change how our country was, and so we did not take that lightly. And so in 1917, in April of 1917, we joined the Allies, declared war on Germany, and President Wilson read this to the nation. He said, "The world must be made safe for democracy." We are a democracy. And if the world is going to try to take that away from us, we have to fight. We have to stand up and fight for our rights. And that's exactly what we were doing against Germany. And so there were people in France were they were excited for us to be a part of it. As we came, they played the Star Spangled Banner, and now we had fresh troops to lead, to give to the battle. And so those that had been fighting for so long were very battle worn, very, very exhausted, and so that helped our entrance into the war, helped really to end it in a fast way. And so in November of 1918, what they called the Central Powers surrendered, and World War I came to an end. And we call November 11th now Veterans Day. Okay, so every year on November 11th, we honor our veterans, those who have served in our armed forces. And the League of Nations was formed in an attempt to bring peace to everyone. So they formed this League of Nations. They went to Geneva, Switzerland, because that was Switzerland has always been neutral in every single war. They have never participated in a war, and they've declared themselves a neutral nation, and that's what they are. And so whenever we have needed a neutral ground, this has always been a place that we could consider neutral, because you don't want to. It makes people uncomfortable to go and sign a peace treaty in the country that you're trying to make peace with, because then you're making yourself vulnerable. But then our country wouldn't want to go to Germany to sign that, and so it would just, the same thing has happened. And so they went to Geneva, Switzerland. 60 countries joined the League of Nations, and they made a pact that they would not build up their weapons, not build any new battleships or big military things for 10 years. That was their agreement. Now, Japan and Italy were in on that agreement, but they did not keep that agreement. They secretly built theirs up. And so that was one of the things that is going to lead to the Second World War. But between the two wars, there were what is called the Roaring Twenties. And we had our president, Calvin Coolidge, was the president at the time. Or shortly after the Roaring Twenties started. But the beginning of this, it seemed to be a happier time. It was the end of a war. People were light. Their family members were home, even though people had lost some of their sons, daughters, moms, dads to the war. There was still an overwhelming feeling of happier times, and the factories turned from making all of the machinery and the bullets and everything for the war efforts, and they started making some of the things that would make life easier, like your washing machine, toasters, vacuum cleaners, refrigerators. There was the invention of the radio. And because of that, it really changed the home life. And so in the evenings, they would turn on the radio and they would hear broadcasts, and they might hear speeches and music and exciting programs and different things. The gospel was then preached on the radio. And so people that couldn't go to church because they didn't have one close to them, or wouldn't go, they might hear the gospel because they turned on their radio that night. And so that was something that really just kind of brought people together as families. And then in 1925, Calvin Coolidge became the first president to give his inaugural address over the radio. So when he entered office, he gives an address to the whole nation. That's called his inaugural address. And he gave that over the radio because they had it. And so whereas before it was only the people that could travel to Washington, D.C., and could stand there in front and listen. And so, you have several hundred or maybe 1,000, I don't know, people that could hear it. But now people from all over the United States, if they had a radio and it was, working right, then they could have listened to this. And so that was something that really just made a change. And so then being able to hear speeches from the president, being able to hear messages from him, and just those things that just made you feel more together as a nation. I think that really was what brought about some of that American pride and American spirit, was this time. Now, the Roaring Twenties didn't last for but a decade, about 10 years, and there was the automobile that came in full swing, and the low prices because of the assembly line and everything. There were lots more cars on the highways now because of that, and there were jobs, and it was just so great. But in 1929, some hard times came, and there were the factories closed, people didn't have money to buy things, the banks ran out of money, and it just kept getting longer and longer, kind of like this pandemic. They keep telling us, keep staying inside longer and longer. But this was, it turned into months and years now. And, you know, some people couldn't pay their bills. Some people lost their homes. Some people had, you know, they couldn't buy things. They had lines upon lines of people waiting for a handout because of some group, like similar to the Salvation Army or a shelter that would be able to give them one meal, you know, a bowl of soup or something. And it was, they'd wait. You see that the people at the soup kitchens and bread lines, and so people would wait to get some food. And sometimes, you know, they only had it for like once a day. But this was a really difficult time for the U.S. But there are many people that remember that time. And even when it seemed like all was lost, God would work out something in a special way. And you see, God can still do that today. We don't have to rely on the government to fix the problems. We can go to God directly in prayer. And so the Great Depression, there are many people that remember that and remember what God did through that time. And so that's, I think, the most important. Our government, President Franklin Roosevelt, worked to end the Great Depression by creating jobs, building highways, dams, bridges, giving people jobs that were paid by the government. But the government was as poor as everyone else. And so, unfortunately, this seemed like a good plan, but it really did kind of pull our economy down. And we have repercussions from this even today. And that's one of the biggest things in politics is the debt that we're in. And this is where it started. But the government started printing more money than it actually had. So if you understand that your paper money is actually equal to a certain amount of gold that they have that's like stored. So they've got this gold and you print money that represents the gold. Okay, that's what our money is. But if you print more money than you have gold, then you make the value of your money go down. And so that's what happened. The value of the money went way down. And so the value of money fluctuates over the years. And that's why. Because if you go to a different country and you have like $5 and you want to go exchange it in their country, some countries, the value of their money is worth more than our money. So if you give them $5, they might give you $2 in their money. Okay, that, of course, they don't go by dollars, but that's kind of how it is. But some countries are actually poorer than us, and the value of their money is way less. And so when you give them $5, the exchange would be like you getting $7, $8, maybe $10. So something like that, depending on their economy in their country. Okay, I hope that didn't confuse you too much. But that's kind of how this value of money works, is that it's based on the storehouse of gold that the country has, and maybe a little bit silver and some other things like that. But that's what we talk about when we say that the value of money is low. It's because they have more money out in circulation, more cash and coins out in circulation than they have that's what should be worth that amount with the gold that they have that is in the bank vault. And so it was a temporary solution, but it really did have long-term repercussions, long-term consequences that we have to deal with. And so, by the end of by late 1930s, towards the end of the 1930s, getting closer to 1940, there were some jobs opened up. But only when we went to war again did the last traces of the Great Depression disappear. Going to war actually brought in money, if you can believe it, but that's what happened. And so, but they had these plans for peace, as we talked about with the League of Nations a few minutes ago. But the US, Great Britain, France, Italy, Japan, they decided to reduce or cut back number of weapons, size of the armed forces the country had. They agreed not to build any new battleships for 10 years. But as I said, Japan and Italy actually did it secretly. But after 10 years was up, then everyone else started making them. And so we noticed that Japan had a huge navy. Germany's Army, Navy, Air Force was very strong. So these things really were what were going to lead into the Second World War, that we're gonna face. And so there's a comprehension check on page 209 and 211. So I want you to read again pages 206 all the way to 211 at the comprehension check, and answer those two comprehension checks on paper. Make sure that if you haven't taken your quiz 29 that you do that. And then this is the last day of double lessons. And so then tomorrow will be Friday will be just one lesson day. And so then we'll be right on track. We'll have our spring break after that, and then we'll come back and we'll have at least another week of online video lessons. So do well, learn a lot through this, and we will see you next time.